the third episode of the Going podcast. My name is Weinstein, and I'm joined as always by my partner, Peyton.
Hey guys, before we jump into a very eventful podcast, Cole and I would like to recognize our newest affiliation, Fan Lodge.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, David. So basically, we're excited to announce that we've joined forces with Fan Lodge Sports. They're a blog that caters to all fan bases, whether it be any sport, football, baseball, basketball.
Yeah, it's very interactive website. I run the USC Trojans kind of page on there. I post every week about, stuff that's happening basically in USC. I do a lot of history pieces, and Cole over there runs the Chargers, and I believe it's the
The New York
Redskins.
Giants. The New York
It's
Giants.
it's the Giants.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a new thing that started up. A lot of cool guys writing there. We're writing there, and definitely, if you see this, make sure to check out Fan Lodge. Link's going to be in the description below. And if you want to start watching our videos from Fan Lodge, you can do that also because our videos are going to start popping up there also.
So let's get into it. First, news broke today that Peyton Manning will be retiring from the National Football League after 18 seasons. What do you think's next for him on this grand adventure that we call life?
I think Peyton still is going to want to be around the sport. I think personally, he's going to make the decision to go into broadcasting. I think that's something he wants to do, and I think that's something he's going to be good at. He's friends with a lot of people who are in broadcasting right now, and I think that's a good fit for him.
All right. Of course, he's just a great contributor to the league. He owns nearly every statistical record known to man for the QB. And he did it before he turned Brett Favre's age when Brett Favre retired. So, we're going to be really sad to see him go. It's going to be really weird watching Sundays without him. And, yeah, what more can I say? Dude's a legend.
Yeah, seriously, it's like for the last 10 years, obviously there have been other stars, there's been Brady, but during the regular season, it was always sort of Peyton's time. Peyton threw this touchdown pass, Peyton threw this, and it was always Peyton because he was just so dominant and he was so popular, and it's going to be so weird not to have that anymore, and have Denver and Indianapolis without Peyton. It's a weird thought.
Yeah, it is, but a group of guys came in on last weekend to Indianapolis to see who might kind of replace him as the league's front runner in QBs. Did you see anybody who threw well enough to be considered the next Peyton Manning?
At the combine, personally, I like Jared Goff. I don't know if he is, the best quarterback around. I don't think he's going to be the next Peyton Manning, but I really like a lot about him, and I think he has a shot to be a Pro Bowler and maybe even an All-Pro. I don't think, obviously, he'll be a Hall of Famer, but I really like what he has, and I think, he's going to turn a lot of heads when he gets into the league if he goes to the right system.
You know who really impressed me?
Who?
Wentz.
Why? Talk about that.
He really impressed me with his physicality. He checked in at, I think, 6'5", over 200 pounds. The dude's a beast. I think he can be like a Ben Roethlisberger. He certainly has that level of athleticism. He didn't run like an extremely fast 40 like we saw Marcus Mariota.
But he was tied for second out of all the QBs. He was tied for second.
Yeah, but it was still, it was like a 4.77. Yeah, that's not like we saw Marcus Mariota and Michael Vick run way faster times than that, but he's not a pure speed guy.
But he's bigger than both those guys.
He's huge. He's like a Cam Newton type of player. Not saying like that his style of play is like Cam Newton's because it's not. But if you watched him run at North Dakota State, he would just demolish people as he ran over him. And those numbers, like his measurables just going into the day, really impressed me at the quarterback position. I loved his athleticism. I think he can go really far in this league. As far as passing, he actually did pass very well during the positional drills, and I think he can really be someone who can immediately raise your QB position, whether at LA, San Francisco, I don't know, but I think he can really be a cornerstone of a
Yeah, how do you think he would fit in
NFL
Cleveland?
team.
Because that's where they're talking he's probably going to go.
You know, Cleveland's picking what, number 2 this year?
Yeah, number 2.
I don't think. Yeah, I think you'd be a great fix in Cleveland actually. Um, I don't know because they already. You know what? Yeah, I say the Cleveland Browns should draft him at number 2 because they're in dire need of someone to take over in the quarterback position. They're probably an injury away from having the locker boy come out and play. So I think what's his name? First
Carson
name?
Carson
Carson.
Wentz. Yeah, Carson Wentz.
I think Carson Wentz is gonna be maybe not a superstar at the next level, but certainly a player who can maybe reach a Pro Bowl once or twice in his career, and someone who can really give you the stability you need in order to draft skill positions around the quarterback. Because you can't use your first round pick every year on a quarterback. That's just not going to work. So I think he's going to provide some stability to that organization, and I think they can really move on.
I guess my thing about him is he hasn't proven himself yet. Obviously, he played at North Dakota State, a smaller school. The level of competition is not as great as say a guy at Cal like Goff or Connor Cook at Michigan State, who played real NFL caliber type guys. He played at North Dakota State. Obviously, that's one thing. And the
Hey,
other,
don't knock the FCS guys. What about Joe Flacco? He's doing fine at the next level.
definitely no, Flacco is talented, but there's a lot of other guys who aren't Flacco who were never drafted or didn't succeed in the NFL. And that's my big thing is that I think number 2 is really rich, and especially a team like Cleveland where they've drafted better quarterbacks than Wentz to go there, and it hasn't worked out. And
Well, I
I
no for to address your point about having their he hasn't proven himself. I think that's why the combine is important for the guys who haven't proven themselves, maybe haven't faced top level competition. But again, what really impressed me is that he was able to throw as well as any guy at 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 the combine. Maybe except Jared Goff, but he still slung it really well.
the one thing I
And
actually
he and
The one thing I actually will say is that Wentz did throw the deep ball really well, and I will say that I was impressed by that. Whereas in my big issue with Goff has been that Goff doesn't throw the deep ball as well, and that really did impress me that Wentz was throwing the ball well. But I guess my thing about it still is, he's in gym shorts. He's not throwing with a pass rush. He's not throwing where corners are covering these guys. He threw well. Don't get me wrong, and he's very smart. I saw an interview he did with Steve Mariucci where
yeah, did you hear that he hasn't gotten lower than a B since 8th grade?
I did, and I have no doubt the kid's smart. He's probably got what it takes mentally, but
You're
I
just
want
a
to
hater, is that what you're saying?
I want to see more from him before I could take him at number 2. Take him at number 7 with the 49ers maybe. I feel like a number 2 overall pick. There's real game changers on the board at that point. And I think that that's just a little bit too rich
But
for a guy
as a
like him.
quarterback, what next game changer do you think is going to be better than Wentz um at the next level? Who do you think the Cleveland Browns should draft because they need a quarterback? I don't think they brought Josh McCown back. So who you're gonna play? Johnny McCown, who's probably gonna be in prison? Just have him freaking Skype over there? Have like a Skype bot throw the ball? No.
I guess what I'm saying is that while I guess they have no choice to draft him in Cleveland, I don't think he can. I don't think he'll work out there. I think he's going to face a lot of issues like most quarterbacks do in their first year. And the Browns have not been a very patient franchise as far as first round quarterbacks have gone. They've been known to kind of throw guys out pretty fast because they're a team in need. They need to win right now. Their fans are upset because they have not won in however many years. They haven't made the playoffs in, I want to say it's something like 15 years. That's my biggest thing with them is that I think yes, well you don't really have a choice but to draft him because it's a cold weather city, it's windy. I don't know if Goff would work there either. My thing is that I don't know if they'd be patient enough for him. And I almost feel like in that situation you would be better off re-signing McCown and drafting a game changer like Ramsey and seeing what you can do with McCown for a year.
I think you do bring back McCown, but I think you also draft him so McCown can take over the spot right now. But you need a guy like Wentz waiting to take over to be his turn because Wentz is, I think, the best option for the Browns
I would agree with
this
that.
year.
This year maybe not, but I don't hate your idea of bringing back McCown and benching Wentz for a year, letting him sit
Yeah,
behind
get a
McCown.
experienced journeyman kind of quarterback to bring him in. Let him start. And if he's not doing well, you always have Wentz throw him in there. And it's not like I think Cleveland fans can wait. I disagree with you. I don't think they're that impatient. I think they can wait a couple years for Wentz to develop because again, this is a team. What 15 years haven't been to the playoffs? I think they can wait a little bit longer just so they can develop a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback.
I guess I would agree with that. I guess my biggest thing is that Wentz going to Cleveland just is not the best situation for him because and I don't know if he could work out there
What
because
situation would be better?
I think going to a franchise that, is
Because you mentioned 7 at San Francisco, and you talk about impatient fans. They went from going to back-to-back NFC championships to going what were they this year? Like 2-14 or something like
I
that.
want to
6-10.
4 and I think they had 5 wins.
Yeah, they were horrible. And San Francisco fans, they're not used to being horrible. They have like I think the most or second most Super Bowl wins in history. They're a proud organization that has really taken a hit, and that's why they hired Chip Kelly. And I don't think Carlos Wentz will feel any less pressure in San Francisco than he would in Cleveland.
Okay, that's a valid point. I guess I feel like the people in the front office of San Francisco and the coaching staff in San Francisco is going to be a little bit more patient with him, whereas and I feel like Cleveland, for whatever reason, has just not been good for these quarterbacks. And I worry that because he hasn't had the experience that he probably needs to really be a good quarterback yet. I feel like he'd go to Cleveland, he would struggle early, and that would
Like most quarterbacks, Marcus Mariota, he had a few strong games at the beginning, but he was pretty much harassed for most of the season. He had a pretty rough season to go along with his rookie season, and yeah, I think everyone struggles in the beginning, and I think Cleveland fans, out of maybe any fans, will understand that. And I also don't think that he's talented enough that he shouldn't be able to like sit behind a long-term starter. Like I think he's talented enough not to sit behind Romo, or I think he's talented enough not to sit behind Flacco or someone like that. And that would just be a waste of talent. And I think he needs to go to a place where they'll throw him into the fire and let him trial by fire, basically. And I think that'll be good for him.
I would agree with that. I don't think trial by fire in Cleveland is the best place because I just feel like once again this is just what I can only go off of is all these quarterbacks who have gone to Cleveland, they've been thrown into the fire, they struggled and they were out the door a year later or 2 years later. I just feel
Those
like
were some historically bad quarterbacks.
Brady Quinn was pretty good in college. Like there were a lot of these guys who
I meant in the NFL, like that, but when they were kicked
Brady
out, they
Quinn
were.
wasn't horrible. Like that's my thing is it's like as soon as Brandon Weeden started, yes, did he have a great did he have a great first season? No. But people were ready to throw him out the door after his first season. And after his second season, I want to say he got benched. During his second season, he got benched. My thing is I just don't feel like this is the right place for Wentz. I think Wentz can be successful in the NFL. I think he's got the measurables. I think he's got the smarts. I just don't think he has the experience yet, and I don't think Cleveland is the right place for him.
But none of these guys have. You keep saying that he doesn't have experience, but none of these guys have experience. This is the NFL. It's a whole new ball game.
But
Whether if you're hopping from the FBS to the NFL or FCS to NFL, it's gonna be a big change either way. And
But Goff was a 4-year starter at Cal in a top 5 conference.
where he got where like each year he got like the most was like 7 wins, which is last season.
They won 9 games last year.
Did they?
Want to say they did. But yeah, you'll check on that in a second. But I guess what I'm saying is that these guys, a lot of these guys have had more experience, whereas in Wentz has really played one full season. He played in his junior year one full season. He won the championship for the FCS. And then in his second year, he had a wrist injury and he only played like 8 games. He hasn't even had 2 full seasons of college football. Once again, if he goes to the right situation, I think he will work out. But I think that he needs time and patience. And I think Cleveland is not in the place right now where they're going to have that. I think they have some issues organizationally. And I just don't feel that Cleveland
No,
is the
I
right
was
place for
right.
him.
They were 7-5. Oh, 8-5 last
Eight
year.
and five.
Sorry,
Okay.
they won their bowl game.
Okay.
And let's talk about Goff actually for a
Definitely.
little bit. I really like his short accuracy, and I think he could work a little bit on his deep ball, but he's very talented on throwing the ball over the middle, something Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady does.
Hmm.
And
Actually, speaking of Brady, the funny thing is when I first started watching tape of him, the thing he reminded me of was Brady. And what I mean by this is obviously I don't think he will be the next Brady. Obviously, there's a chance that could happen. There's a chance that could happen with any quarterback. But what I felt like was at Cal, he ran a very similar offense to what Brady runs now, and he was very successful in that offense. The short passing game offense where he throws to his running
I,
backs.
I don't really think the bear rate is similar to what they run at New England, but I get your main point.
I just obviously it's not the same offense, but there was a lot. He ran a lot of short passes and a lot of screens, and it felt similar to Brady's. Sort of the way his mannerisms are and the way he sort of plays in the pocket and how he sometimes breaks out of the pocket when he needs to. It all very much reminds me of sort of the way Brady plays, and they're pretty similar size. They're both 6'4". Brady's 10 pounds heavier, but they're both pretty similar. I know everyone also likes to compare Goff to Matt Ryan, and all those guys are all around in the same size. Where do you think Goff would go or
Um,
should go?
I think Goff. I don't think he should, but I think he's going to go to the 49ers at 7. There's no way the 49ers let him fall anywhere because the 49ers do need other positional help, but if you look at what they have right now, they have a guy who got replaced by Blaine Gabbert, and then you have Blaine Gabbert. So you're not in the really best of situations there in San Francisco, and I think if anything else, they need to draft a quarterback to kind of calm the rage that the San Francisco have at Trent Bulk and at everyone who's
And
running
Jed
that
York, the
organ.
owner.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think obviously I don't think he's gonna fall past the Niners either. My big thing is, and I know I might be one of the few people who think this, but I think that, or yeah, I think that Colin Kaepernick still has the ability to be a starter, and I still think he has the ability to be a really good starter. I just don't think his judgment is very good. I think just, as soon as Kelly came in and tried to help him and be like, hey, you're going to be our guy, Kaepernick wanted out. Kaepernick wanted
Well,
to go to
we
the
don't know
Jets.
what's happening. Like Chip Kelly doesn't have a great relationship with his players. Bunch of players on the Eagles spoke out against
It's a
him.
good point.
So he may have said, which I don't think he ever did, that Kaepernick's going to be our guy. And there was reports that said he wanted to go to the 49ers just to get Kaepernick, but we don't know that. We don't know that for sure. He could have went in there, told Kaepernick, yeah, you're going to be a backup to Blaine Gabbert once we start the season. We don't know what's going on behind those closed doors. And to your point about Kaepernick, I do think he can be a starter. I don't think he can ever be at the starter that produced as well as he did in the early seasons of his career. But I think he can be an okay starter if they actually find a coach who can utilize his talents to the extent that they were meant to be used.
Well, and I think very much so that's what Chip Kelly can do because Chip Kelly did a lot of that in Oregon. I understand college is different than the NFL, but I think Kelly can utilize Kaepernick to what he needs to be. But just to throw it back to Goff really fast, how do you feel about the chance that, say, a team like the Chargers or a team like the Cowboys would draft him and, set him behind them as a backup and guy for the future?
I think the Cowboys are gonna they're definitely gonna draft a quarterback maybe in the later rounds. I heard a report that they were gonna draft maybe Connor Cook in the second, third rounds. But I don't think they take one this early. There's positions that they definitely need to address, and quarterback is not one because Jerry Jones came out and said, "Hey, we're not gonna take a quarterback in the first round. We're actually gonna uh, Tony Romo's our quarterback for the foreseeable future." And I think they'll just have a number of journeyman quarterbacks and maybe one or two rookies behind him. So I don't think the Cowboys will take him in the first round.
Yeah, I definitely see that. The one thing though is that Stephen Jones didn't come out and say that, and I think he might be the guy who's holding the reins here. I know Jerry's the big figurehead, but remember, Stephen Jones was the guy who talked Jerry out of not drafting Johnny Manziel. He was the one who said, we got to draft offensive line for the past few years. I think Stephen Jones is the guy holding the strings, and I think maybe he's the one who is.
I wouldn't put it past Jerry though.
I agree with that. And obviously, I think Jerry saying that is a sign that they probably won't draft a quarterback, but it's something to think about.
And also, to your point about the Chargers, they're in a pretty good shape for the next 4 or 5 years. They obviously have a great quarterback over there, Philip Rivers. Maybe they draft like a later round, maybe like fourth, fifth round quarterback, but I don't really see them doing that. I think they're fine where they are right now.
Yeah, definitely. I think definitely speaking about the Chargers, they have a good quarterback in Philip Rivers, but a lot of the rest of that team has some needs and some holes that need to be filled, and there's some serious talent up at the top of this draft, and drafting a guy like a Bosa or Jalen Ramsey or a DeForest Buckner or Tunzel if he falls to them, I think that would serve them a lot better than drafting a quarterback who's probably not going to start for them for a few years. Heck, for all we know, Philip Rivers, because he's never had injury problems. He's played all the games in his career. He has a Ironman streak of 160 games or something like that. For all we know, Rivers' contract that he just signed last year could be over, and then he could be re-signed, and like he still has a lot left in him. Goff's rookie contract could be over before Rivers even retires. So I don't think that would be a good pick for them.
Okay. So let's wrap up the QBs and let's finish with our sleeper picks and as in like who's the next Kirk Cousins basically of this year's draft?
I don't know if it's a Kirk Cousins, but this is a guy who could go in the later first round, who I personally really like. I know a lot of people aren't as high on him, but I'm a big fan of Paxton Lynch. I think.
Ooh, Paxton Lynch. You've been talking a lot about this week about Connor Cook, but Paxton Lynch, yeah, I like him too.
Here's my thing about Paxton is that I definitely don't think he can start today. I think if a team drafts him, I actually think he would fit really well in St. Louis because, you could sit him behind a Case Keenum, or I guess you could start him in a very simple offense where he'd hand the ball off to Todd Gurley, which is basically what they did last year.
That's gonna be their offense next year.
But my thing about Paxton Lynch that I find so fascinating is, first off, the dude's huge. He's like 6'9", and he's like 240 pounds. But not only that, when watching tape, I realized when he gets out of the pocket, he throws really well. Like, he does some of his best work outside of the pocket, and I think that's a really good trait for him. And I think that they can work on his skills within the pocket, and they can work on his just overall mechanics. And I think that he could be really successful. Obviously, I've heard the reports that people think he's a little aloof and that he might not be the quarterback prototype as far as mentally. I don't know if that's true, but I really like from what I've seen on tape.
My sleeper pick is Cody Kessler.
Okay.
He's threw the ball very well. Not much on the deep passes, but that's expected for a guy who's projected to go around fourth, fifth round. He delivers a very pretty ball when he doesn't have any pressure coming at him, which I know is not very realistic, but that's something you could definitely work on. He's very accurate on those short passes. A knock on him would be his athleticism, but I think that he can be a solid backup. I think he could even maybe start one day. But yeah, he's my sleeper, especially if he plays that well and he gets drafted in like the fourth, fifth round.
Yeah, definitely. I think, if you drafted him to, I know they have AJ McCarron, but a team like Cincinnati where Cody Kessler measures out very similarly to Andy Dalton. And that's a team with a really good offensive line. That's a team with really good wide receivers. That's a team with a good defense. So if Andy Dalton were to go down like last year, this is obviously,
I actually kind of want the Cowboys to draft him
I could totally
because
see that.
because if Romo goes down, Cody Kessler will be going in and
With a great offensive line
yeah,
in
yeah,
indoor stadium where the wind's not going to disrupt his passes.
yeah, and history has shown us that he's very accurate when he doesn't have any pressure whatsoever coming at him. And though that would be bad in most places, the Cowboys have a ridiculous offensive line, and I actually think he could thrive there.
Yeah, that offensive line measures up to that great wall of Dallas from the 90s. I completely agree with what you're saying. And I think he could, train. And obviously, Romo's an injury prone guy. He's had collarbone issues.
And he's having surgery soon. He's going to be out 6 and 8 weeks for a plate surgery, I think it is.
Yeah, I think that's what it was too. And I really like that. I didn't even think about that. And I feel like it would work because they've had their issues with backups when Romo went down. And I think Kessler not only could be a solid backup if Romo were to go down, but I think that they could train him and they could, build him up, and he could be a decent replacement for Romo. I actually really like that. Do you want to move on to other positions now?
Yeah, let's go. Let's look at the running backs.
Running backs. Cool.
There was really just two guys that stood out to me during the combine, and those is Derrick Henry and Ezekiel Elliott.
Basically, the guys who stood out last season in college football.
Yeah. Derrick Henry, just a physical beast. His size compares favorably to Von Miller, who's a linebacker. He runs like a 4.5 40. He weighed more than all but one fullback. Dude's a monster, and he proved that that he's very athletic with his broad jump, his vertical jump, his cone drills. He really impressed me during this combine.
Well, in every measurement at the combine, he was top 15 among running backs. The crazy thing for me is his 60-yard shuttle was tied for 4th amongst all running backs.
And he's huge.
He's huge. The dude can change pace. Obviously, there's the carries issue at Alabama.
You could play him at defensive end, and he wouldn't blink.
Yeah, I think the thing about him is, I think what worries me, I think the physical measurements, those work out, but I don't love the fact that he's gotten so many carries at Alabama, because I think that that's already wearing and tearing on his body, and I think that, he might have a shorter shelf life. And I think my one trepidation with him is that a lot of Alabama running backs haven't worked out. Whereas
you can't just say that because of Trent Richardson.
No, I'm
Trent
saying
Richardson has been like really bad. You can't blame something on him. Like Matt Miller said, I think is the guy who said, grade the player, not the helmet.
But I guess my thing is, it's like Eddie Lacy is starting to struggle now. You had Mark Ingram.
He had one bad year.
It took him a while to get back into it. He was injury prone for a while. Yes, he had a good season last year, but Mark Ingram's had his issues too. I guess what I'm saying about these Alabama running backs is, yes, they're talented, but they're also, playing on great defenses with great offensive lines.
Defenses? Well, Mark Ingram has a great defense over in New Orleans?
No, they're playing with great defenses in Alabama.
Oh,
we can talk about the New Orleans defense another time. No, I'm not saying the New Orleans defense is good. But my point is that I think that Nick Saban is running a great system there in Alabama, and I think he gets these great physical beasts, and I think that sometimes they don't work out. I think Derrick Henry...
Well, I mean, every time some of them don't work out, you cannot judge a player by the school he goes to and players before him. You have to look at this guy and how he ran last season and how he's a physical beast and how he can run you over, even if you're freaking Vince Wilfork, okay? I think he's going to be really good at the next level. If not a 3-down back, he can certainly be in there for like first downs, and he can really wear that defense down if he goes to a team that's willing to give him the rock.
I guess, no, I would agree with that. I guess what I'm saying is, I don't know if he's worth a first-round pick to me. I think the only running back who might be worth a first-round pick is Ezekiel Elliott. I think taking him in the second round, I'd have no problem with taking a chance on him because there's a lot of upside to a guy
Now
like Derrick
he's
Henry.
Ezekiel Elliott. Let's just switch gears and talk about him for a second.
Definitely.
He is maybe the best. Do you agree with me that he is the best running back in this class?
Oh, no question about it.
What really impresses me about him is not just his running ability, but how soft his hands are. Like
Yeah.
he can really catch the ball, and he looks it in. He didn't have many drops last year at OSU, and I really think that he can be an every down back if given the chance at an NFL team.
Definitely, I agree with that. And obviously, he's a bigger guy, but as you said before, he can catch the ball. He can stay on the field for 3 downs. His blocking's fine. And the thing that I remember watching is it was last season, that game he had against Alabama, where everyone thought Ohio State was going to lose, and they went and played Alabama in the playoffs for the first year, and no one could touch him. And if they did, he would truck them because he was just so dominant. And I think he can bring that to the next level. I think he measures good, and I really think that I don't think he's Todd Gurley, but I think he can be very similar to him and be one of the better backs in the league for a long time coming. He is a guy who I'd spend a first round pick on.
Okay, let's switch gears again and let's look at the wide receivers.
Sure.
Who was your favorite wide receiver? And who do you think is going to have the most bright future in the NFL?
This is tough for me because there's not a singular guy who really stands out to me.
Oh, for me there is.
In this class where it's like he's the clear number one. There's a lot of guys who I like. I'm a big Josh Doxson fan. I like Will Fuller a lot. I think Braxton Miller could be an interesting project. Obviously, Laquan Treadwell's good.
Give me your top 3. Just give me your top 3 on guys you like there.
All right. In no particular order, I would say Doxson, Fuller, Treadwell. That's not in any order. Those are like my top 3.
I'm going to give you mine.
Okay.
Michael Thomas from Ohio State. Tyler Boyd from Pittsburgh. And my third one would be Will Fuller from Notre Dame.
Is that in order from first to third, or is that just no particular order?
I think that's in order.
Okay.
I said Michael Thomas first, right?
Yes.
Yeah, then that's definitely in order.
Okay, cool.
Michael Thomas, I think he's going to go in the first round, and I think he's a big body wide receiver. Maybe not in the first round. Actually, now I'm thinking about it, maybe late first round, maybe early second round, but he should go early. And he ranked in the top 15 in the bench press, broad jump, 3-cone drill, 20-yard shuttle, and the 60-yard shuttle. He didn't have a bad 40-yard dash with 4.57 seconds, which is not bad considering how big he is. He's a very, very physical wide receiver, and I think I actually want the New Orleans Saints to draft him to replace Marquise Colston.
I could see that. He's a pretty big-bodied guy. One guy who I just want to name just because I was watching a tape of someone else and he just popped out to me. It's a guy named Aaron Burbridge. He's from Michigan State. I
I know where he is. I got a lot of friends who've been raving about him, and he had a very successful career at Michigan State. But I don't think he's a first-round talent.
No,
I think he's more like a third, fourth-round talent. But I do think that he might have a fairly decent career in the NFL.
I guess what I'm saying is I don't think he will get drafted in the first round. I think he'll get drafted in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th.
Oh, he's definitely. He wasn't even in the conversation.
But my thing about him is that every time Connor Cook threw the ball, it was in Burbridge's hands. He was catching
name
everything.
Another wide receiver from Michigan State.
I agree. There's not a lot, but he was really good, and I would argue that a lot of Connor Cook's success is owed to him. I think that he could be a steal in the later rounds. You know, he could be obviously not to the same effect, but I think he could be sort of the Antonio Brown of this class, a guy who has the potential to really break out. Obviously, I don't know if he'll be as successful as Antonio Brown, who's like the best receiver in the NFL right now, but I think that he could be that steal of this class. I think he's really underrated.
I gotta say, I'm very surprised that you didn't have Tyler Boyd in your top 3. Can you walk me through why?
The big thing is I don't know him as well as I probably should. I think he's good. I like that he's big-bodied. My big thing is he's a little slower than I would like. I think the big thing that,
Again, football speed versus his
but
40
in
speed.
football, I'm not talking about his 40 right now. Like he plays a little slow to me. I've only watched like one tape of his, but I guess
I think you should watch more tape there, Cole. On his tape, he looks insanely fast. He has very, very good hands, and he could be a solid starting wide receiver. Maybe in the slot, maybe outside, but I think he can be an impact player for a team um, who really needs one right now. Um, yeah, he was. I don't know what you mean slow. He was. I think he really burned during games.
I don't know. I guess we saw two things differently. Maybe I need to go back and revisit his tape. But my biggest thing that I at least saw was he was very much a guy who was relying on the fact that he was bigger than his corners, which that works in college. But at least to me, it felt like he was very much relying on his body, and he had great hands. But at least to me, it felt like he was a little slower than I would have liked. Maybe I need to rewatch tape because I know obviously you think he has fast game speed, but I
Well, I
think
wouldn't say like the fastest game speed, but I think he ran plenty fast during games. I didn't think sluggishness was a knock on him by any means.
I get that. Speaking of guys who are a little bit slower, what do you think about Laquan Treadwell deciding not to run the 40-yard dash?
I think you really hurt his draft stock. Um, he had that incident, or I think around bowl time where uh, what did he got arrested for uh, he got arrested for something is a thing, and the decision not to run the 40 I think really hurt his draft stock. I think he'll still go first round, but I think more teams were turned off by it, and the things he did do at the combine wasn't very
He
was
wasn't in the top 15 in anything he
yeah,
did.
yeah. He he didn't impress. He was supposed to be a big wide receiver who had great hands, and he was supposed to be like the next kind of Megatron, wasn't he?
Yeah, very much so. I think obviously he he was a big body dude, a big body guy, great hands. I think my issues with him are the same thing. I feel like he is Tyler Boyd times two almost, where I feel like he is that much slower, but he's also that much
But
bigger.
he doesn't need to be that fast because he's just huge and he goes over people and can grab like anything throw at him. But
He had a on the field incident with a assistant coach and was arrested in December in his hometown of Buffalo on charges of resisting arrest and menacing uh, following a fight with bouncers outside of a bar. So obviously he might have some character issues as well.
yeah, and I think that'll turn teams off, especially since what the Cleveland Browns are going through with Johnny Manziel right now. I think that's gonna kind of make teams look twice at him before they draft him.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's got talent. That's why obviously I put him in my top three. But that being said, I still think he's gotta prove that he can do it off the field, and I also think he's got to prove that he's fast enough. And I didn't like that he didn't do that at his combine. It's not like he's a Laramie Tunzel, where Tunzel's basically almost guaranteed to be the first overall pick. This dude's not even guaranteed to go in the top 10.
Mm.
Any other guys who you wanted to point out, who you enjoyed, or who you liked watching at the combine, or thought they did good?
Um, that's pretty much it for me. I think we talked about all my guys.
There's actually one more guy I'd like to talk about really fast. I believe
Will
I'm
Ferrell,
Will
Will Fuller, my
Will Fuller. Yes.
Will
Um,
Ferrell. Yeah.
let's talk. I had one other guy, but let's talk about him first. Obviously, a blazing fast combine, 4.2340, which was first.
4.32
Oh,
40.
I'm sorry. Did I say 2.3?
Yeah.
Yeah, my bad. No, he
That
didn't break.
would
He
be.
didn't break Chris Johnson's record. He wasn't that good.
But yeah, he actually really impressed me with his speed, and I think he should go maybe early second, because there's so many good wide receivers this year. But I think Will Fuller should definitely not fall past maybe 36, maybe his 36th pick. Yeah, he could definitely be someone who can contribute to a team. Maybe the Seattle Seahawks grab him, which they definitely need another wide receiver. And I think they could grab him in the second round.
Well, the thing I saw that was interesting was I was watching Path to the Draft on the NFL Network, and they were talking about how he would actually be an interesting fit for the Chargers, and they're obviously an early second round team. They need a guy opposite Keenan Allen, and I feel like that would work. They need a number 2 guy, and I feel like Will Fuller has the speed compared to Allen, who's the slower guy.
Oh yeah, that's right. Who was that Charger wide receiver that retired this year?
Malcolm Floyd.
Yeah, I think he could. Uh, of course, Malcolm Floyd was a great wide receiver, and I don't think. Well, maybe. Of
Maybe.
course, there's always a chance that he could replace him, but yeah, I think he could step into those shoes for a
Yeah.
while. So, are there any other players you like?
Yeah, definitely. I really liked Jalen Ramsey out of Florida State. I think going into the combine, he was the top prospect, someone who people think could really, really be one of the best players out of this class. And I think his combine numbers showed it. He was only outside the top 15 in one category.
Which
Uh,
category was that?
it was his bench press, 14 reps, which still isn't horrible, but
Not for a cornerback. That's not that bad.
yeah, it's not that super important. As far as his vertical jump and his broad jump, he was first in both. He jumped 41.5 inches for his vertical, which is huge, and his broad jump was 135 inches. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, everyone's been saying that he's maybe top 3 players in this draft.
Mhm.
He's just a beast, and I don't think anyone was surprised about that.
Yeah, well, it's. I think he really just proved what everyone was thinking in the combine with this great combine performance. Like, there have been people who've compared him to Charles Woodson. I've seen a Rod Woodson comparison. I've seen Richard Sherman. I've seen Tyrann Mathieu. Like, he's getting compared to everyone. I think this could be the next it guy in the NFL. And sort of going back to that Cleveland thing, what I was saying was that when you take, a guy like Wentz, you're passing up a guy like a Jalen Ramsey. I think Jalen Ramsey really has the potential to be one of the best players in this draft, and in a couple of years, one of the best players in the National Football League.
I'm gonna ask for your opinion on something.
Sure.
What did you think about Vernon Hargraves?
I'm mixed on him. I think combine-wise, he was fine. His 40-yard dash was not in the top 15, but for his position, but he ran a 4.5, which is not bad. He benched 15 reps, which was 13th, tied 13th among guys. He had a 39-inch vertical and a 130-inch broad jump along
So
with...
not great numbers.
They weren't horrible. As far as vertical jump, he was 4th. Broad jump, he was 3rd. And his 20-yard shuttle was 3.98 seconds, which was 4th. I don't think they were horrible numbers. I think he was fine.
Okay, all right. I thought they were worse than that, but okay.
Honestly, my biggest issue with Hargraves is just looking at his game tape. I think he struggles in man coverage sometimes. So I know everyone else is really high on him. I think, though, it takes...
Yeah, you've been saying for a couple weeks now that you see him more as a safety than as a cornerback.
I think it would be interesting to see him as a safety just because I think as far as zone coverage, he's really good.
And his tackling skills actually
His tackling
pop
is
off.
great.
Yeah. He stopped a couple of wide receivers as they tried to break that first down plane, and I think he's done a really good job about stopping them in their tracks. So I could see him moving to safety possibly, but I also think that he's a great cornerback. Do you think he's still going to be a really good quarterback in the NFL, or do you think maybe average to pretty bad?
I think it depends on the situation. I think if he goes into a situation where he's going to be asked to play a lot of man coverage early on, I think he could be one of the busts that we're talking about, 5 years from now. But I think that if he goes into a system like Seattle, obviously I don't think he's going to fall to Seattle, but if he goes to a scheme where most of the corners play zone coverage, I think he could be really successful and he could show off a lot of things that made him great in college.
Yeah, I think what teams have to consider is that he has a high ceiling but also a low floor.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to take that into consideration when drafting him because he could be the next big draft bust, but he can also be the next great corner.
Yeah, very boomer bust. Once again, I think you can work on man coverage skills. I think he has it. But at least from what I was watching in my personal tape, I know everyone has different feelings, but I felt like he oftentimes would let guys get ahead of him, and he was always trying to catch up to them.
Not ahead of him, you mean behind him.
Behind. And I guess my biggest thing was, yes, everyone's talking about how at the point of attack, he's great at swatting the ball down, getting the interception.
Oh, yeah, he's great.
But my biggest thing with him was that a lot of times he couldn't get into that position. If he gets into the position where it's him and the wide receiver fighting for the ball, he wins that. But oftentimes the wide receiver is ahead of him where he is not able to get to that place where he's playing catch up all the time, and that he was struggling with guys in college who aren't going to be NFL athletes. Guys only get bigger, faster, and stronger in the NFL, so I could see that issue getting bigger for him if it continues. That being said, I think if he goes to the right system, he'd be very good.
Okay. I just want to talk about a few other players.
Definitely.
I feel like we would be remiss if we did not talk about Joey Bosa, who's one of the top 10 prospects this year. He didn't have if memory serves me correct, he didn't have a great combine, but he certainly didn't have a bad one. What did you think of his combine numbers?
Yeah, no, his combine wasn't as bad as everyone said. He was, top 15 in a few categories. 40-yard dash, he ran a 4.86, which was tied for 14th.
But a lot of people there has been controversy around that because he had to slim down significantly to get down to that number. He slimmed down to run faster, and his running faster, so to speak, was about J.J. Watts, who ran that about 30, 40 pounds heavier than he did. So everyone's saying, well, now he's not as explosive as J.J. Watt as everyone thought coming out of the draft. And he didn't really impress with that. And he's not going to play up that weight. So that speed is not going to be there. In actuality, he could run like a low 4.9 or even a
high five.
Yeah, a high five.
Yeah, I think just what I want to say to that is a lot of people gave Noah Spence a lot of bad press because he ran a 4.840, and everyone was saying, how is he going to be...
But he didn't lose that much weight to get down to that.
But my biggest thing about Noah Spence is how is he going to... Everyone's saying, how is he going to be, a pass-rushing linebacker at that speed? He has to run better at his pro day. But Joey Bosa was slower than him, and if he gets drafted by a 3-4 team, Joey Bosa is going to play linebacker. So it's like, I don't understand the criticism that's so harsh of Noah Spence, but whereas in a lot of people, I guess, are giving Bosa a bit of a break. Yeah, I think he was fine, but his 40-yard dash wasn't horrible, but obviously he's a smaller guy who is more of an edge rusher.
Where would you pick him?
Just personally, I think he's very boomer bust, and I'm not a huge fan of those candidates super high in the draft.
A lot of players are very boomer bust this year, though.
I would definitely agree with that, which is why, if you're the Dallas Cowboys, I'd rather have, I don't know, say a DeForest Buckner or a Jalen Ramsey, someone who is a much safer pick, who, even though those guys have very high ceilings, maybe even higher than Bosa's, I think their floors are a lot higher too. So I'd rather pick a safer guy in the higher draft, which is why I think this draft is going to be interesting for a lot of the top teams.
Let's actually build off of that for a second.
Sure.
Who do you think's the safest, so to speak, pick?
Jalen Ramsey. I think just from his play, I think the only way he wouldn't be a safe pick is if you kept him at cornerback. I think he wouldn't translate as a great cornerback to the next level just because I guess sort of the same issue with Hargraves. Sometimes he lets guys separate from him because he's a bigger guy, so he's not as fluid as, say, some of the smaller corners who can move a little better. But Ramsey would make a phenomenal safety in the NFL. He's a great tackler. He's super smart. He's super fast. He can jump out of the building. Like, he had a 41-inch vertical and jumped over 10 feet at the combine. That's crazy for his broad jump. And just, I think it's really hard. And I don't think he's got a lot of character concerns. Like, I think he was kicked out of practice once when he was younger. But amongst most of the guys, when you dig up dirt, it's not bad. I think he's the safest prospect. I think he has a really good shot to be a great player for a long time. Who do you think's the safest pick?
I was going to say Jalen Ramsey, but now that you said him, I feel like I'm obligated to say something else.
Yeah.
And I'm going to pick DeForest Buckner.
Okay,
Did you see the size of that dude's hands, though? Bigger than a piece of paper. He's just a monster, and I think he'll do very well in the NFL.
Mm-hmm. I think, well, and the thing I love about him is with Bosa, it's like you're not sure if he can play a pass rushing linebacker because you're not sure how he is in coverage because he always played with his hand in the dirt. But the thing about Buckner is if you're a 3-4 team and you draft him, cool, he's your defensive end. If you're a 4-3 team and you draft him, he's your defensive tackle. He can play both spots.
Yeah.
So not only is he versatile and he works for every type of defense, unless you're running some bizarre scheme, but he would work in every scheme. He's got massive hands. He's a beast. He's a monster. And I think
He's going to be a very safe pick.
same thing. Character-wise, he's fine. I really like his safety. So amongst, obviously, we talked about Hargraves. We talked about Bosa. Who do you think is the biggest boomer bust picked? Besides those guys, I guess.
I'd have to think about that, but I think it might be.
You want me to throw in one really fast?
Well, I'm gonna say a guy that might not be taken in the first round, but I think he could be a very big boomer bust, and it's Laquan Treadwell, which we talked about a little bit earlier on the show. If he could just like shore up some concerns about his speed, I think he could be actually a dominant figure in one of the kind of a Marquise Colson type, the quiet storm. Like he's never gonna put up like huge numbers, but I think he could string together a bunch of respectable seasons, and I think a lot of teams are just looking for just that.
Mm-hmm. Actually, funny enough, you know who's a guy who I think...
And again, for Laquan Treadwell, he could also, his big boom would be his respectable seasons strung together, but bust is that he could be someone like Josh Gordon, or he could be someone that starts early because a team picks him high to shore up their wide receiver concerns and ends up totally sucking. Like he doesn't perform well against NFL corners.
He doesn't have the elite NFL speed.
Yeah, and he can't just jump over guys like he did in college, and he could be an extreme bust too.
Yeah. Funny enough, there was another guy who I saw that I think could be a really interesting who's a really big boom or bust player who I don't think was 3 months ago, and that's Jalen Smith. I think this was almost everyone's top defensive guy or one of their top defensive guys towards the end of this season, and he's still, I guess, got it, but he has such a bad knee injury, and
I think it's ACL and MCL, and also some reported nerve damage, I believe.
Yeah, that's what I thought I heard. And they examined it at the combine, and there's thought that he might not play. Like he won't be able to play through at all this year. Maybe not even next year.
Kind of like Kevin White last year for the Bears.
Mm-hmm. And I just think if he can get back to the way he was, this is a tremendous talent and a guy who originally was one of the safest picks in the NFL draft, and a guy who I think could be one of the best defensive players, not only in this draft, but in the last few drafts. But he's got to get that knee healthy, which I'm not sure he'll be able to do. It's just...
Yeah, it's definitely going to nag him throughout his career, I think.
Yeah, he's really a wild card. Sort of along the same line, a guy who I think is a much safer pick is Miles Jack. A much less significant knee injury, had it earlier in the season. He'll miss a couple of games for this season. I think he's really talented in that at UCLA he was able to do a lot of things. He could play running back, he could play in the box, he could play safety, he could do coverage. He could really do anything, and I think that's going to serve NFL teams well.
Did he actually play at safety?
I think he played it in coverage. I don't know if he played in safety, but I think he did some coverage stuff.
He was if memory serves me, he was a middle linebacker, I think.
Yes, he was also a running back though.
He was insanely athletic, and he was one of the first that of course started like Jabril Peppers and Adoree Jackson in college football. He was kind of one of the first to do it both ways as a running back and linebacker. He said he wanted to play linebacker in the NFL, and he did it very well at UCLA before he went down with that knee injury. So I think he's a very safe pick, and I think he'll be a solid starting player in the NFL.
Yeah, definitely, because that knee injury is not even close to as bad as Jalen Smith. And Miles Jack, a guy who's been talented really since high school. We're at Bellevue High School. He won 4 state championships. Anyone else you want to talk about?
I want to talk about Jason Spriggs from Indiana. He was first in the 40-yard dash among offensive linemen with a 4.94 second 40-yard dash. He was fourth in bench presses, where he had 31 reps. First in the broad jump, 115 inches. Second in the 20-yard shuttle with 4.44 seconds. So, what's your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I really like him. I thought he had a really good combine too. I think what impresses me is how he not only was really fast, but was also really strong. He was fourth in bench presses and he was first in a 40-yard dash. He showed that not only is he an athletic player, but he's also a guy who can be strong, and he's not, a smaller offensive lineman who just runs well. He can do a lot of things, and I think that really helped his draft status, and I think he could prove to be a really interesting NFL player, someone who runs maybe a high tempo, high octane offense, who's going to have to move around a lot and has to have good stamina. I think Spriggs could really do something like that.
How does he compare to which is the gold standard of this class's offensive line talent? How does he compare to Laramie Tunzel?
Obviously, he's not Tunzel. No one is Tunzel. Tunzel is
No one is Tunzel.
Tunzel is a mammoth of a player. He's a beast. He's one of the best pass protecting tackles to come out of any draft in a long time. Maybe since Tyron Smith from a few years back. He he's 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 a beast. When he is on the field, Laramie Tunzel is probably the best player in this draft. So obviously Spriggs is not that, but
But yeah, I think that Spriggs did his best to grab the steering wheel from Laramie Tunzel and say, "I'm the captain now."
I think I think Spriggs can prove to be a very interesting starter in the NFL. Obviously, I haven't watched too much tape on him, but from what I saw at the combine, I really liked it. So let's switch gears and talk about free agency. Obviously, the free agency period starts tomorrow, and there's a lot of team with needs, a lot of players who want to find new teams. What do you think about it all, David?
Yeah. Well, let's just first go over cap space, the highest and the lowest. The highest team with the most cap space right now is the Jacksonville Jaguars with a whopping almost $81 million to spend in cap space right now.
I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is two years in a row for them being the top. They're a team with a lot of cap space, a lot of young rookie talent. They're not paying a lot of guys a lot, and I think they're gonna go after a lot of pass rushers, a lot of defense, try and shore up that defense.
You know what's scary though?
What?
Oakland Raiders have the second most, and they're just a couple good players away from being a really dominant team, I think.
I agree with that. I think Derek Carr, obviously good young quarterback. He's the center. I think you got an okay offensive line. I think that can improve. They can work on that in the draft. Obviously, you got Amari Cooper who you can build around. And
But you do. Their biggest need is obviously they're gonna have to replace Charles Woodson, which
course.
I don't know how they're gonna do that. Maybe do you think they trade up and get Jalen Ramsey just like really quick?
I don't think so. Honestly, what I think that they're going to try and do, and I think what would be best for them, is take it from an AFC rival. Eric Weddle has been vocal saying he doesn't want to go back to the Chargers. The Raiders should get him. Weddle still has some game left in him.
I may be wrong, but didn't he have a so-so year last year?
It was down, but he can still produce at a high level. He had some nagging injuries, but I think the biggest thing about Weddle is what he brings an identity to that defense. He brings leadership to that defense, and that's something that they need. They can afford to overpay a guy who's maybe a little past his prime, but Weddle still plays at a high level, and he can provide leadership, and he knows the Chargers. I think that would be a great match for them. Obviously, Weddle, one of the top free agents, and he wasn't franchised by the San Diego Chargers because of that issue that they had. A lot of people thought that they could franchise him.
Other teams that have a high cap space include the New York Giants,
Same
the
thing. I
San
think a few
Francisco
pieces away.
49ers, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And who do you, out of those, who should spend a lot of in free agency, and who should, I don't know, wait?
I think for me, I think all these teams should spend at least some money. I think when you have that much, the salary cap is larger than it's ever been. There's still a lot of good players. None of these teams were playoff teams. I think all of them should spend money. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars should pay all the top defensive players. I think they should go after Weddle. I think they should go after Malik Jackson. I think they should go after Mario Williams. I think they should go after all the top guys and help shore up that defense because
But I think that one of the reasons, and you can disagree with me if you want, is why Jacksonville has such a high cap for the second year in the row is that who really wants to go to Jacksonville?
I would agree with that, but I think Green Bay has the same issue. It's not a huge city, but
No,
I think
I'm not just talking about the team. I mean, I'm not just talking about the city. I'm also talking about the team. Jacksonville Jaguars haven't been good, and even though they improved greatly their offense, they had a really bad defense, and they still didn't win a lot of games. So, who do you think is going to be drawn to going to the Jacksonville Jaguars if they have teams like contenders wanting them to come to their team?
obviously I think someone like a Weddle might not want to because he's been vocal saying, he wants to go to a contender, and I think Jacksonville's still a couple years away from that. But I think the biggest thing that draws players in is money, and Jacksonville has a lot of it.
Well, I would agree with you for the younger guys,
Like
but
the
the
Malik
older
Jacksons.
yeah, but the older guys, um, they want to win games, and I don't think Jacksonville can offer that.
But some of those guys already have Super Bowls and they're still looking for a last paycheck. And here's the thing though. Jacksonville is a team trending up. Blake Bortles is their quarterback. They have wide receivers. That offense was pretty prolific last year. Like they had some really
TJ Yeldon is coming up too.
Yeah, same. Definitely. I think if they work on that offensive line, Yeldon will be even better. Bortles will be even better. And I think the big thing is that defense needs to be fixed. And I think when they can pay those guys and give them significantly more money than other guys who might be a little bit more of contenders, if they offer them that much more, they'll go to them. I think if they really want to, they can sign guys.
Okay, so the people in the lowest cap space are the Dallas Cowboys, the New Orleans Saints, the New York Jets, the Miami Dolphins, and the Washington Redskins. The Dolphins and the Redskins are actually above cap space right now. What do you think they should do?
I think you meant below by that. But yeah, I think that's difficult for both of them because the Dolphins placed the transition tag on Olivier Vernon, which means that teams can offer him contracts. And if my memory serves me correct, not that much is going to happen if someone offers Olivier more money. He'll just go to the other team because they place transition tag on him. And same thing with the Redskins. The Redskins are letting a lot of good players go who helped them make the playoffs last year because they don't have the cap space because they are paying Kirk Cousins a lot of money. I think eventually you're going to have to cut some players or renegotiate some contracts to get above that cap, or get below the cap. And I guess the biggest thing that I see is obviously they're not going to spend a lot and they're probably still going to have to cut a few more players.
And I think the correct terminology is actually above the cap since the cap is like.
Yeah, you're right. My apologies.
So let's talk about some of the best free agents on the market.
Yeah, definitely. So how do you feel about, a guy like Malik Jackson who wants so much money, but obviously he's a game changer. He's a disruptor.
I say give it to him if you need that desperately, which some people do because they're looking at Von Miller and the Broncos defense, and they're gonna want Malik Jackson, who is actually on the Broncos, to come into their team and bolster their front seven.
Yeah, and a lot of people called Malik the best player on that defense, better than Vaughn. I guess my thing is when you get up past the $15 million a year area, that's when it starts to become a little bit too much because yes, is Malik Jackson worth that money from his play? Yes, but I think the biggest issue is that there's a certain amount of money that should only be reserved for quarterbacks because the quarterback is the player who changes the game. I'm just going to use Von Miller for an example. Say he has a 20-sack season. That's him disrupting a play 20 times. Say he, I don't know, has 20 more pressures, and that's a phenomenal season. That's 40 times he changes the game or he disrupts the game. A quarterback takes control of the game every time he touches the ball, which is 70, 80 times a game. That's just my opinion because you need to pay. There should be a certain amount that you should only pay quarterbacks because it's a cap league, and you need to find that quarterback and pay him money. and then get cheaper talent around him.
Let's talk a second about Mario Williams, who will be um, a sought after free agent.
Definitely.
Um, who who do you think he's going to go to? First of all,
I think he's going to go to the Giants. He's already having a meeting with them tomorrow, and I've heard reports that they're not going to let him leave until a contract is signed.
yeah, I think Giants too, who are going to be trying to replace Jason Pierre-Paul, who they're going to let walk, and they actually might bring him back for significantly less money because I'm not sure what teams will actually be interested in him.
Well, here's my thing with Pierre Paul actually is that Pierre Paul, for the right price, could be a steal because yes, he's missing some fingers on his hand, and that does disrupt his play, and that he's not going to be the same player. But it's not like it messed up his lungs. It's not like it messed up his legs. He can still run as fast as he can. He still has a high motor. He still has great technique.
Yeah, and he's do you remember that top 10 moment last year when he swatted that ball thrown by Cam Newton with his big glove?
Yeah, he's still a phenomenal athlete. So I think that obviously it's for the right price. If you pay him too much, if you play any player too much, obviously it's not gonna work out, and you need to be aware of his issues and not expect him to be the same JPP that he was before. But I think if you really pay him the right amount and get a deal for him, I don't know, a 3 million, a 5 million a year, I think he could be really talented. I think he could be special. I think he could help a contender out.
Okay, let's move on. Eric Weddle, you think he stays in that conference or does he go outside?
Um, I've heard. I think of the three big teams that I've heard Pittsburgh, I've heard the Giants. Once again, the Giants have a lot of cap space; they can spend a lot of money, and I've heard the Raiders.
Out of those three, where do you think he'd be the best fit? I think he'd be the best fit in the Raiders because he'd be taking over for
Charles Woodson.
yeah, Charles Woodson. Sorry, total brain fart.
It's all good.
But yeah, I think he'd be stepping into a legend's shoes, and I think he can step up to that. And I think he actually does want that challenge.
I would agree with you. I think he would be a great fit in Oakland. I think he'd be a good fit in New York. I think the best fit is Pittsburgh, and here's why. He wants to be on a contender. Pittsburgh's a contender. And they've really, really had a sore spot at the safety position ever since Troy Polamalu retired. Am I saying that Eric Weddle has ever been Troy Polamalu? No. But what I'm saying is that he can bring that type of leadership, and he's still a very talented player. He still has some left in the tank and can play
Right.
for a contender and an organization that is notorious for treating their players well, because obviously there's been reports that the San Diego organization didn't treat him as well as he would have liked. I think that's a good situation for him. I think it works out schematically, and I think it works out for him as a person. I think that's the kind of place he would like to be.
Let's talk a little bit about Lamar Miller. I heard some news this week that the Dolphins and him were far away from a contract extension, so he'll most likely try out free agency. Do you think he lands up with the Dolphins again, or do you think he ventures outward?
I think he's going to get a little bit more money than what Miami's probably offering him at this point, but I don't think he's going to get anywhere what he deserves. I think Lamar Miller is a tremendously underrated player. He's had some really good seasons, but for whatever reason,
And tremendously underutilized.
he hasn't gotten the love he deserves. But at the same time, because of that, he's not this top player that he's trying to get. He's not top money. I don't think he's worth top money, and I think a lot of teams don't think he's worth top money. I think he's better than a lot of people do, and he's underrated. But I don't think he's gonna. I think he's gonna get a fair amount of money for some other team that's probably not a great team, probably one of the teams with a lot of cap space. A team like Tampa that doesn't have Doug Martin anymore, as he's probably going to go to free agency and get a lot of money. So I think Lamar Miller would work out for a lot of teams, maybe not the best contenders, but I think he can get the money that he wants, or at least close to it. I want to throw it back over now to some of the franchise guys. The franchise tag obviously had a big year this year. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And all the guys who were franchised were Kirk Cousins, Justin Tucker, Eric Berry, Jermaine Johnson, Muhammad Wilkerson. Olivier Vernon got the transition tag, which is a little different. Cordy Glenn, Von Miller, Josh Norman, and Alshon Jeffrey. And just to talk about this a little bit for a second, I really like a lot of these. I thought Justin Tucker is a great move to franchise because he's one of the elite kickers in the NFL and will be for a long time, and the Ravens would be ridiculous to let him go. But the big thing is that because the franchise tag isn't, it's the top 5 average for your position. Kickers aren't paid that much, so it's not a huge cap hit to pay him. I think it was $5 million, $4 million for a franchise tag. So I really enjoyed that. I like that. I like Kirk Cousins because I feel like Kirk Cousins needs another year to prove it, so that way he can get the money that his camp wants. Because I know him and the Redskins are very far apart, and I like sort of paying him $19 million, paying him close to what he wants, almost $20 million, paying him what he wants for 1 year to prove himself and to prove that he is an elite quarterback who deserves the money. And then there's a lot of other guys who I liked. Obviously, you had to franchise Von Miller. He's a great player. But as I said with Malik Jackson, I would caution overpaying for a guy who's not a quarterback. And I think you could get into an area where you're paying him too much money that it will just hinder your team. As far as some of the other guys, Josh Norman, I felt like should have been franchised. I like that. I liked Alshon Jeffrey. I thought they were both good players who still have a lot of career left, and they should be franchised. And Muhammad Wilkerson, I thought was an okay franchise. I think Eric Berry, same thing. I thought both those were okay. But I think the big one that surprised me and surprised a lot of people was Tremaine Johnson for the Rams. He was a cornerback. I think of the 2 cornerbacks that they had going into free agency, most people thought that it would be Janoris Jenkins getting the franchise tag, if anyone, because Tremaine Johnson's not a huge name. And if I recall, he had an okay season. He was pretty good, but not franchise money. I think that's a lot of money, and I'm not sure that the Rams should have done that. That was the one that I found really questionable. All the other ones I understand. I feel like they're justifiable. Some I like more than others. But I didn't really like Tremaine Johnson. The thing that I think is interesting, though, about this is there's a lot of time, especially last year, where like a Des Bryant was franchise tagged and he was really upset with it and wanted to go into free agency. And instead of, getting the money that he wanted for a long-term contract, he only got it for 1 year. There's not a lot of guys who are outwardly upset about the franchise tag this year. No one really wants to, be able to test the market and go into free agency.
Speaking of people who want to be in free agency, Colin Kaepernick has recently asked 49er
GM Trent
brass,
Baalke.
basically, to trade him, which is kind of confusing to me because you got Chip Kelly coming in who made Nick Foles a decent quarterback.
A Pro Bowler.
Yeah, and I'm thinking he comes in, you can make Colin Kaepernick, who was a Pro Bowler before that, just a horrible 2 last seasons. But before that, he was a Pro Bowler, so I think Chip Kelly, I was thinking Chip Kelly comes in and turns him to an MVP quarterback. Well, what do you think about all this?
I think Chip Kelly could come in and do a lot of good stuff with Colin Kaepernick, sort of as I was talking about before. I think Colin Kaepernick could be a really interesting fit with Chip Kelly, and that would work out really well. But for whatever reason, Colin doesn't want to be a part of it. I think he's annoyed with the 49ers brain trust over there. But I think the biggest thing is I don't think he knows what he wants, and he wants to be traded, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me because one of the teams asking to trade him is Cleveland, or wanting to trade for him is Cleveland. I don't feel like Cleveland would be any better of a situation than San Francisco, and feel like in fact, I feel like it'd be worse. Yes, obviously, Hugh Jackson, the head coach over there, has done some good stuff with Andy Dalton, but I think...
But I think at least at Cleveland, you're guaranteed a starting spot.
I think that he has a pretty good chance in San Francisco. I think Joe Montana is the only guy who liked Blaine Gabbert.
When they're debating whether they should start you or Blaine Gabbert.
To be fair, Blaine Gabbert did not have a horrible
Okay,
season.
but still, Blaine Gabbert. If they draft Jared Goff, he could be, like, I'm not saying he will be, but there's a chance he could be number 3 on that depth chart.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I'm not sure he would be. I'm not sure they would draft him if he'd just be number 3. Obviously, I don't know what's going on over there in San Francisco. I don't know what's going on behind the closed doors. But I feel like if they draft Goff, he would be the starter there. I guess just my biggest thing is, yes, San Francisco has its issues, but Kaepernick needs to acknowledge that Chip Kelly is good with quarterbacks.
Oh yes, he's very good. But do you? I've said this before. Do you think that he'll be so accepting about Chip Kelly just telling him what to do and all the time? And like he's more of an improvised quarterback. Would you agree with me on that?
Yeah, I would.
And if you're always in this thing with designed runs, and he's gonna start to get a swell head, even if he doesn't. Uh, even if he does comply to Chip Kelly's system, he's gonna get a swell ahead and might start to make improvision, and then a bad pass, then he might go down a long road of just getting worse and worse again. So, I yeah, it's just a weird situation.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think, at least how I'm looking at it, is that Chip Kelly learned a lot from his time in Philadelphia, and I think he's going to be respectful to Colin Kaepernick. I think it's gonna be a bit more of a symbiotic relationship. Will it work? No, that's not guaranteed. But I think there's a better chance than not that that could work out if Kaepernick and Kelly both buy into this. I think if they buy into this symbiotic relationship, I think that they could, at the very least, turn San Francisco around to get them winning records. I think they could be a 9-7 team because Kaepernick's not an incompetent quarterback and Kelly's not an incompetent coach. And I think those are the two most important pieces to any NFL team. If you put those two together and they're both pretty good, I think that can get you a winning record. And I think that can get you some playoff spots in some years. I think overall, yes, I agree. There's a chance that it doesn't work and that Kaepernick could get a big head again like he did um, with Harbaugh, but I guess I'm more believing that it will work than that it won't.
Okay, well, certainly a complexing situation over there in San Francisco. But I think it's time for us to sign off, don't you think, Cole?
Yeah, of course. We had a really fun time today. It was a good episode of the podcast. Go on, look forward to delivering another one to you coming up very soon. As always, check the description below. Follow us on our Twitter. Check out Fan Lodge Sports, our new affiliate. Our stuff's going to be on there too. Some of our writings are going to be on there. Cole Weinstein, David Adams. Make sure to check us out on there. Make sure to check out our videos on Fan Lodge. Drop a like on this video if you haven't already. Please subscribe. Check the description below. And thank you very much for listening to this. I'm Cole Weinstein. That's David Adams. Have a great day.